The steady monitor beep was the only sound inside room 412 of Chicago General Hospital. I sat on the edge of the hard plastic chair, squeezing Clara's cold fingers between both of my hands. Her forehead was wrapped in thick white gauze, and minor scratches lined her pale face. "Please, Clara," I whispered, leaning close so my forehead touched her arm. "Just wake up. Open your eyes. I'm right here." I had been praying for hours, bargaining with God, promising anything if she would just pull through after the truck smashed into her sedan. Her fingers twitched inside mine. I gasped, sitting up straight as her eyelids fluttered open slowly. "Clara." I cried out, a flood of relief washing over me. "Thank God. You're awake. You're going to be okay." She blinked at the fluorescent lights, her gaze drifting around the room before landing on me. There was no warmth in her eyes. No recognition. Just a cold, blank stare. She pulled her hand out of my grip. "Who are you?" My heart stopped. The room suddenly felt ice cold. "What do you mean?" I laughed nervously, reaching for her hand again, but she pulled it further away, pulling the thin hospital blanket up to her chest. "It's me, Ethan. Your husband." "Husband?" She frowned, shaking her head slowly. "No. I don't know you. Where am I? Why am I here?" "Clara, stop joking around," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "We've been married for 5 years. We live in Lincoln Park. You had an accident on the highway." "I don't know any Ethan." Her voice spiked with sudden panic, and the heart monitor began to beep faster. "Get away from me. Doctor. Help." The door swung open, and Dr. Marcus Hayes rushed inside, flanked by 2 nurses. He looked at the monitors, then placed a hand on my shoulder, gently pulling me back from the bed. "Mr. Vance, please step outside for a moment while we check her vitals," Dr. Hayes said firmly. "Dr. Hayes, what's wrong with her?" I asked, my chest tightening. "She doesn't know who I am. Let us evaluate her first, Ethan. Please wait in the hallway." 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I paced back and forth across the shiny hallway floor until Dr. Hayes finally came out, closing the door softly behind him. He held a clipboard, his face grim. "Doctor, tell me what's happening," I demanded, stepping forward. "I'm afraid I have difficult news, Ethan," Dr. Hayes said, signing a paper on his board before looking up at me. The blunt force trauma to her head was severe. The MRI scans show significant swelling in her temporal lobe. "What does that mean for her memory?" "Clara is suffering from severe, permanent retrograde amnesia," Dr. Hayes explained flatly. "Her long-term memory has been wiped. She has lost all recollections of her life prior to the crash. She doesn't remember her past, her home, or her marriage to you." "Permanent." The word felt like a physical punch to my stomach. "Are you telling me she will never remember our 5 years together?" "The brain is complex, but in cases like this, recovery of past memories is extremely rare," Dr. Hayes replied, placing a sympathetic hand on my shoulder. "You must be patient. Forcing her to remember will only cause extreme emotional distress. You need to give her space." Over the next 3 months, I tried everything to help her rebuild her life. I brought our photo albums to our quiet house, laying them out on the dining table. "Look at this one," I said gently, pointing to a photo of us laughing on a beach in Florida. "This was our honeymoon. You dropped your ice cream in the sand and laughed for 10 minutes. Clara looked at the photo, her face completely expressionless. She took a step back, folding her arms over her chest. "It means nothing to me, Ethan. It feels like looking at strangers in a magazine." "Clara, we can start over," I pleaded, taking a step toward her. "We don't have to force the past. Let me win your heart again. I love you." "Stop," she said coldly, turning her gaze toward the window. "Every time you look at me like that, I feel trapped. You see your wife, but I just see a stranger holding me hostage in a life I don't remember." "I'm not holding you hostage," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm trying to save our life." "Well, I can't do this anymore," she snapped. The next morning, I walked down the stairs to find suitcases lined up near the front door. Clara was packing her remaining coats into a duffel bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "I'm moving into an apartment downtown," Clara said without looking at me as she zipped the bag shut. "I need space, Ethan. I need to discover who I am on my own without you hovering over me." "Clara, please don't walk out that door," I begged, tears filling my eyes. She picked up her bags, looked at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes and said, "Goodbye, Ethan." Then she walked out, leaving me alone in an empty home. 6 months of painful silence had passed since Clara packed her bags and walked out of my life. I spent every evening sitting in our quiet living room, trying to make sense of the empty spaces she left behind. My phone buzzed violently on the coffee table, shattering the quiet. I picked it up without checking the screen. "Ethan?" My cousin Sarah's urgent voice came through the speaker. "Hey Sarah," I said, rubbing my tired eyes. "What's going on?" "Ethan, you need to listen to me carefully," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Are you at home?" "Yeah." "What? Is something wrong?" "I'm sitting at the Grand Lux downtown right now for a work lunch," Sarah said rapidly. "I just saw Clara." My heart did a sudden violent flip in my chest. "Clara? Are you sure?" "She told me she moved into a tiny studio to get her life together." "Ethan, she isn't in a tiny studio," Sarah snapped. "She is wearing a diamond necklace, a $3,000 Chanel dress, and laughing like she hasn't a care in the world. And that's not even the worst part." "What do you mean?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter as I stood up from the couch. "She's sitting at a corner table holding hands with Julian Montgomery," Sarah said. "Julian Montgomery? The real estate developer?" "Yes. The heir to Montgomery Enterprises." Sarah hissed into the receiver. "Ethan, they aren't just having lunch. He just kissed her cheek and she leaned into him. She looks completely fine. There's no trauma, no confusion, nothing." "That doesn't make any sense," I stammered, my mind racing. "She lost her memory. She didn't even know her own name when she left me. Then how did a woman with zero memories land a billionaire heir in 6 months?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Something is terribly wrong here. Meet me at my office in an hour. As a journalist, I can pull records. We need to dig into this." An hour later, I was sitting in Sarah's office, staring at her laptop screen while she typed furiously. "Look at this," Sarah said, turning the monitor toward me. I ran a search on Clara's recent activity. 2 weeks before her car accident, a private offshore account made 3 separate wire transfers to a personal account. "Who owns the receiving account?" I asked, leaning in close. "That's the smoking gun," Sarah said, pointing to the name on the screen. "It belongs to Dr. Marcus Hayes. Your wife's attending neurologist." I stared at the name, feeling the blood drain from my face. Marcus Hayes? She transferred $50,000 to her own doctor right before the crash. "Exactly," Sarah said, her tone dark. "Why would a patient wire thousands of dollars to her doctor prior to an accident unless it was a payoff?" "She bribed him," I whispered, the crushing weight of realization setting in. "The diagnosis, the MRI results, the permanent retrograde amnesia. Hayes faked all of it." "It gets worse," Sarah added, clicking another tab. "Julian Montgomery announced his engagement 3 days ago in a private society column. The bride-to-be is listed as Clara Vance, a woman who lost her past but found her soulmate." "She didn't lose her memory," I said, anger finally burning through the numbness. "She used the accident as an excuse to erase me without filing for divorce." "You need hard proof, Ethan," Sarah warned, placing a hand on my arm. "Bank records won't stand up in court without a direct link. You need to hear it from her." "I know where she goes," I said coldly. "She used to love the private terrace cafe near the financial district. If she's living Julian's high life, she'll be there." 20 minutes later, I pulled on a dark jacket and walked into the quiet outdoor cafe behind the high-rise office towers. I stayed hidden behind a thick decorative hedge, scanning the tables until I caught sight of her. Clara was sitting alone at a corner table under a large canvas umbrella, holding an iced latte. She raised a cell phone to her ear, a radiant, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Dr. Hayes, relax," Clara's voice floated over the hedge, loud and clear. I held my breath, pulling out my phone and tapping the record button. "No one is going to find out," Clara laughed into the phone, her tone dripping with arrogance. "Ethan is an idiot. He actually believed every single word you said about my brain damage. He was practically weeping while showing me old photo albums." She paused, taking a sip of her drink before continuing. "Julian bought the whole story too," Clara said with a light chuckle. "He thinks I'm a tragic, innocent flower who forgot her past. The wedding is set for next month at the cathedral, and once I sign that marriage contract, the Montgomery fortune is mine. Just make sure the original medical files stay buried. You got your money, so keep your mouth shut." She ended the call and laughed softly to herself, admiring a massive diamond ring sparkling on her finger in the afternoon sunlight. I stepped back into the shadows, saving the audio file on my phone. The grief inside me died right then and there. In its place grew a cold, razor-sharp focus. "You want a grand wedding, Clara?" I muttered under my breath, watching her walk away. "I'll make sure you get one." The audio recording played in a steady loop inside Sarah's office, Clara's cheerful voice cutting through the speaker like a jagged blade. Ethan is an idiot. He actually believed every single word. I sat at the wooden desk, staring at my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. The suffocating pain that had crushed my chest for 6 long months was completely gone, replaced by a cold, sharp stillness. Ethan? Sarah asked softly, leaning over the desk to pause the recording. Are you okay? We can stop this if it's too much. No, I said, my voice low and steady as I looked up. I'm better than okay. I'm finally seeing things clearly. What do you want to do? Sarah asked, her hand resting on the desk. We can take this recording straight to the police or even to the medical board. Dr. Hayes will lose his license and Clara will be forced into a corner. No, that's too easy for her, I said, shaking my head. If I turn this in now, she'll hire a high-priced lawyer, claim the audio was edited, and quietly settle out of court with Julian's money. She'll walk away with a slap on the wrist while I'm left picking up the pieces of my ruined life. So what are you proposing? I want total exposure, I replied, leaning forward. She wants Julian's family name and his billions. She wants the high society status she thinks she deserves. I'm going to strip all of it away in front of everyone who matters to her. I like the sound of that, Sarah said with a thin smile. Where do we start? We build an airtight trap, I said. First, I need official, certified copies of our marriage certificate from the Cook County Clerk's office. Clara never filed for divorce. Legally, she is still my wife. Consider it done, Sarah nodded, pulling out a yellow legal pad and writing quickly. I'll handle the city records tomorrow morning. What about the money trail? I'm hiring a forensic accountant, I said. I spoke to an investigator named Arthur Vance this morning. He specializes in tracing hidden assets and offshore wire transfers. We need to link the exact money transfers from Clara's offshore accounts to Dr. Hayes' private holdings. Good, Sarah said. And I'll use my press credentials to dig into Julian Montgomery's circle. I want to know who is attending this grand event. 2 days later, Arthur Vance met us at a quiet diner on the north side of town. He slid a thick blue folder across the diner table toward me. You were right on the money, Ethan, Arthur said, taking a sip of his black coffee. The $50,000 wired to Dr. Marcus Hayes didn't come from an anonymous donor. It was moved through a shell company registered in Nevada, owned directly by Clara Vance. Did you find anything else? I asked, opening the folder to inspect the stamped banking ledgers. Plenty, Arthur replied, pointing to a highlighted section. Over the last 4 months, Clara has accepted over $200,000 in luxury gifts, designer clothing and jewelry from Julian Montgomery. But here's the kicker. She deposited those items into a private safety deposit box under her maiden name. She's securing her exit strategy, Sarah observed, leaning over my shoulder. If things go wrong with Julian, she still walks away rich. She won't walk away with a single cent, I said, closing the folder with a firm snap. When is the wedding scheduled? 2 weeks from today, Sarah said, pulling up an online high society calendar on her phone. Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. St. Jude's Cathedral downtown. The invite list includes Chicago's wealthiest developers, city officials and major media outlets. St. Jude's, I repeated, a cold smile touching my lips. It's a massive venue with state-of-the-art audio-visual equipment for broadcasted services. What are you thinking, Ethan? Sarah asked, her eyes lighting up with realization. I know the head AV technician at St. Jude's, I said. I redesigned the cathedral's administrative annex 2 years ago as part of an architectural contract. He owes me a personal favor. You're going to crash the wedding? Sarah asked. Crash it? No, I said softly. I'm going to host the final act. The following week, Clara unexpectedly called my personal phone. I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting on a weak, broken tone. Ethan? Clara's voice came through the receiver, sounding distant and fake. I'm calling to check on you. I left some old books in the attic, but I don't want to disturb you if you're upset. It's fine, Clara, I sighed into the mic, pretending to swallow back tears. I'm still trying to adjust to the empty house, but I understand you need to move on. I won't stand in your way anymore. I'm glad you're being reasonable, she said, a hint of relief in her voice. You were always a good man, Ethan. You deserve to find someone who fits your simple life. Thank you, Clara, I said, keeping my voice utterly devoid of anger. I just want you to be happy wherever you are. Goodbye, Ethan, she said, hanging up the phone without another word. I looked down at the dark screen of my phone, a quiet laugh escaping my throat. She thought I was defeated. She thought I was sitting in the dark, weeping over a lost marriage, while she picked out floral arrangements and silver cake knives for her grand entry into high society. "Enjoy your final days of luxury, Clara," I whispered to the empty room, looking at the USB drive sitting on my desk, fully loaded with bank statements, audio files and legal documents. "Because in 2 weeks the whole world is going to see who you really are." The stained glass windows of St. Jude's Cathedral cast rich shades of crimson and blue across the crowded pews. Hundreds of high society guests, dressed in designer tuxedos and evening gowns, filled the sanctuary. Camera flashes flickered from the press gallery, eager to document the wedding of the year between Julian Montgomery and his beautiful bride. I adjusted the cuff of my dark suit, standing in the shadows near the rear entrance. In my right jacket pocket rested a wireless remote control linked to the cathedral's multimedia system. Under my arm, I held a folder containing certified municipal documents. "Are you ready for this, Ethan?" Sarah whispered, standing beside me near the stone pillar. "I've been ready for 6 months, I replied, my voice steady. "Did the AV team confirm the feed?" "Everything is set," Sarah said, checking her watch. "The moment the screens power on, your signal overrides the ceremonial slideshow. No one in this room can stop it." "Good," I said, watching the front of the church. "Let the performance begin." At the altar, Julian Montgomery stood confident in a black tuxedo with a rose pinned to his lapel. Next to him, Clara looked breathtaking in a custom bridal gown, her long veil flowing behind her. She smiled radiantly, clutching a bouquet of lilies, looking like the picture of pure innocence. The elderly minister raised his hands, signaling the congregation to sit. "Dearly beloved," the minister's voice echoed through the cathedral speakers, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Clara turned slightly, locking eyes with Julian, her smile widening. "If any person present can show just cause why these two may not lawfully be joined together," the minister continued, his deep voice filling the silent hall, "let them speak now or else forever hold their peace." The sanctuary remained still for a brief second. "I speak," I said, stepping out from behind the heavy stone pillar. My voice bounced off the vaulted ceiling, clear and unmistakable. Gasps erupted through the pews as heads turned toward the aisle. "Who is that?" a woman in the third row whispered loudly. "Is this part of the show?" a man near the aisle asked his partner. I walked slowly down the aisle, keeping my eyes fixed on the altar. Clara's smile instantly froze. The color drained from her face as she recognized me, her knuckles turning white around her bouquet. "Ethan?" Clara gasped, taking an instinctual step back. What are you doing here?" "Who are you?" Julian demanded, stepping in front of Clara and glaring at me with contempt. "Security? Get this lunatic out of here immediately." 2 security guards stepped forward from the sides of the nave, moving to block my path. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said calmly, raising the manila folder. "I am Ethan Vance. And according to the state of Illinois, I am still this woman's lawful husband." The entire cathedral went deathly silent. Whispers broke out among the guests like wildfire. "Husband?" Julian turned his head toward Clara, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Clara, what is he talking about? You said your past was completely erased." "He's lying, Julian," Clara yelled, her voice trembling with rising panic. "He's a crazy stalker. I don't know him. He was an obsessed neighbor who tried to take advantage of me after my accident." "Is that so, Clara?" I asked, stopping 20 feet from the altar stairs. "You really don't remember me?" "I don't know you," she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at me. "Security, drag him out." "Let's refresh your memory then," I said quietly. I pressed the red button on the remote control in my pocket. Instantly, the massive presentation screens suspended above the altar flickered to life. The church organ stopped playing as a video recording played through the cathedral speakers. On the giant screens, Dr. Marcus Hayes appeared sitting at his desk, sweating nervously as an interviewer off-camera questioned him. "Dr. Hayes," Sarah's voice echoed through the speakers, clear and sharp. "Did you forge the medical diagnosis for Clara Vance regarding her retrograde amnesia?" I was paid." Dr. Hayes' voice boomed through the sanctuary. "She offered me $50,000 in cash and offshore transfers. She wasn't injured at all. Her scans were completely fake. She instructed me to tell her husband that her memory was wiped so she could abandon him without legal consequences." The crowd gasped in unison. Julian's father, Arthur Montgomery, stood up abruptly from the front row, his expression turning thunderous. "What is the meaning of this?" Arthur roared, glaring at Clara. Before Clara could answer, the audio track on the screen shifted to the recording I had taken at the outdoor cafe. Her unmistakable voice resonated through the entire building. "Ethan is an idiot," Clara's recorded voice laughed over the speakers. "He actually believed every single word you said about my brain damage. Julian bought the whole story too. He thinks I'm a tragic, innocent flower who forgot her past. The wedding is set for next month, and once I sign that marriage contract, the Montgomery fortune is mine." Clara dropped her bouquet, covering her ears as she burst into frantic tears. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." "You faked your amnesia?" Julian whispered, staring at Clara in horror as he backed away from her. "You lied to me? You used me for my family's money?" "Julian, please let me explain." Clara sobbed, reaching out to grab his sleeve. "It isn't what it looks like. I love you." "Don't touch him," Arthur Montgomery barked, stepping up onto the altar platform and shoving Clara's hand away. "The wedding is cancelled." I walked up the altar steps, stopping right in front of Clara. I pulled the legal documents from my folder and pressed them into her trembling hands. "Happy wedding day, Clara," I said with a cold, quiet smile. "Consider yourself served." Screams and frantic chatter filled St. Jude's Cathedral as guests stood up from their seats, pushing toward the center aisle to catch a glimpse of the altar. "Turn it off. Turn those screens off right now." Clara shrieked, her voice cracking as she threw her bridal bouquet onto the polished stone floor. Tears of rage smeared her dark mascara down her pale cheeks. "The truth is already out, Clara," I said, taking another calm step forward. "No one can unsee what you did. You ruined my life," she screamed, lunging toward me with clawed fingers. "You pathetic, jealous liar. You ruined everything." Before she could touch me, Arthur Montgomery stepped heavily between us, his face bright red with anger. "Get away from him, woman!" Arthur barked, his powerful voice ringing above the noise of the room. He turned to the church security officers standing frozen nearby. "What are you idiots standing around for? Get this fraud out of my sight right now." "Julian, please?" Clara sobbed, turning to Julian with outstretched, trembling hands. "You know me. You love me. He manufactured those recordings using artificial intelligence. You have to believe me." Julian backed away from her slowly, staring at her with total disgust. "Don't touch me, Clara. Don't even look at me." "Julian, baby, listen to me," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "Listen to what?" Julian shouted, his fists clenched tight at his sides. "Listen to you brag about tricking your own husband? Listen to you plot how to bleed my family's estate dry. I was just foolish." Clara wept, dropping to her knees on the steps. "I did it because I wanted a better life with you." "You didn't want a life with me," Julian spat, ripping the white silk boutonniere off his lapel and tossing it onto the floor at her feet. "You wanted my bank account. The engagement is over. Get out." "Security, remove her immediately," Arthur ordered again, waving his hand toward the side doors. "And call our legal department. I want a full audit of every gift and asset this woman touched." Two uniformed guards grabbed Clara by her arms, lifting her off the altar steps. She kicked and screamed, thrashing against their grip as they dragged her past rows of whispering high society guests and flashing news cameras. "Ethan, please?" Clara screamed, her eyes wide with terror as she looked back over her shoulder at me. "Tell them it's a mistake. I'm sorry, Ethan." I watched her struggle without a single trace of pity in my chest. "You made your choice 6 months ago, Clara. Now you have to live with it." As the guards pulled her toward the heavy wooden doors, I raised my arm and motioned to a process server waiting at the back of the nave. He stepped forward quickly and handed a second set of stamped legal documents directly to Clara. "Clara Vance, you are officially served," the process server stated loudly over the chaos. "You are being sued for fraud, legal misrepresentation, and attempted bigamy." Clara dropped the papers onto the floor as the doors slammed shut behind her, cutting off her desperate screams. The cathedral remained in complete disarray. Julian stood near the altar, resting his hands on his knees, staring at the floor in utter shock while his father spoke furiously on his phone with the family's senior partners. "Ethan," Sarah said, walking up beside me with a small smile on her face. "The local news networks just picked up the live stream feed from the church. It's trending nationwide." "Already?" I asked, looking down at my phone as notifications began flooding the screen. "Every major news outlet in the country is running the story," Sarah said, showing me her tablet. "The headlines are brutal. Socialite fakes amnesia to scam billionaire heir." "What about Dr. Hayes?" I asked, looking up at her. The Chicago Police Department just dispatched a unit to General Hospital, Sarah reported, her tone sharp and satisfied. The state medical board suspended his license 10 minutes ago based on the financial wire transfers. He's facing charges for falsifying medical records and grand larceny. Julian looked up from the altar steps, catching my eye across the empty aisle. He took a deep breath and walked down toward me, stopping 2 steps away. "I don't know what to say to you, Ethan," Julian said quietly, his voice raspy and humbled. "I was a fool. I thought she was special, but she was just using me to hurt you and take my money." "You were a mark, Julian," I said honestly, looking him dead in the eye. "She didn't care about you, and she certainly didn't care about me. She only cared about herself." "Thank you," Julian said softly, extending his hand. "If you hadn't walked down that aisle today, I would have signed a joint property agreement with a monster." I shook his hand firmly, then turned toward the exit. "Where are you going now, Ethan?" Sarah asked, walking beside me as we stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight away from the flashing press cameras. "Home," I said, taking a deep breath of clean air. "To start over." 6 months after the altar fell apart at St. Jude's Cathedral, the high-rise office of Vance and Associates Architecture looked out over the Chicago skyline. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, illuminating my desk where blueprints for my latest commercial design lay spread open. My phone buzzed on the glass tabletop, vibrating next to a freshly brewed cup of coffee. I glanced down at the screen. The caller ID displayed an unknown local number, but I recognized the digits immediately. I tapped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello? Ethan?" A ragged, desperate voice came through the speaker, accompanied by muffled weeping. "Ethan, please don't hang up. Please just talk to me for 1 minute." I leaned back in my leather chair, keeping my tone completely flat. "What do you want, Clara?" "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she sobbed into the receiver, her voice sounding thin and broken. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I was crazy, I was greedy, and I let pride blind me. I didn't appreciate the honest, beautiful life we had together." "It's a little late for remorse, isn't it?" I asked quietly, looking out over the city streets below. "I have nothing left, Ethan." Clara wept hysterically. "The court froze all my bank accounts. Julian's father filed criminal charges for grand larceny and fraud against me. I spent all my savings on defense attorneys, and my own family won't even take my phone calls. I'm broke, living in a cheap motel outside the city, and everyone treats me like a monster." "You chose to destroy 2 marriages for money, Clara," I said coldly. "You brought every single bit of this on yourself." "I know I was wrong," she cried out. "Dr. Hayes cut a plea deal with the prosecutors yesterday, Ethan. He's testifying against me to save his own neck. I'm facing 3 years in prison. Please, I'm begging you, talk to the prosecutors. Drop the civil lawsuits. Tell them you forgive me." "Forgive you?" I let out a low, bitter laugh. "You watched me weep at your hospital bedside for weeks. You stood in our living room and told me I was holding you hostage while you laughed about my tears with your accomplice. Where was your forgiveness then?" "I was stupid," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic. "I was terrified of being poor. But I still love you, Ethan. In my heart, I know you still care about me. We can fix this. I'll do anything you want." "You don't love me, Clara," I said, my voice rock solid and devoid of any lingering pain. "You just missed the safety net I provided. You tried to ruin my entire life without a second thought, but all you did was push me to build a better one without you." "Ethan, please," she screamed as someone in the background of her end shouted for her to keep it down. "Don't abandon me. I have no one else." "Goodbye, Clara," I said calmly. "Good luck in court." Before she could speak another word, I hit the red end button and permanently blocked the number. I set the phone face down on the desk. My chest didn't ache. My heart didn't race. The heavy ghost of betrayal that had haunted my thoughts for the past year was completely gone, evaporated like fog in the morning sun. The office door clicked open softly, and Sarah stepped inside holding 2 folders under her arm. "Was that her again?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow as she walked toward my desk. "Yeah," I nodded, sliding the blueprints into alignment. "It was Clara. Begging for help with her criminal case." "Did you give her any?" "Not a single word," I said, looking up with a genuine smile. "I hung up on her." "Good," Sarah said, placing a folder on my desk with a satisfied smile. "Because the city council just approved your design proposal for the new Riverfront Community Center. The contract is officially ours, Ethan." "That's incredible news," I said, standing up from my desk. "We worked 3 months on those structural schematics. You earned this, Sarah said, looking at me proudly. You took the worst storm of your life and turned it into the foundation for a whole new future. We earned it, I corrected her softly. I couldn't have survived the wreckage without you pulling me out of the dark. I walked over to the glass doors leading out to the private balcony. Stepping outside into the warm afternoon air, I leaned against the railing and took a deep, clean breath. When Clara walked out of my life, she thought she was leaving a broken man behind in the ruins of a failed marriage. She thought her lies would leave me shattered while she soared into a world of unearned luxury. But lying at the bottom of her deceit only forced me to rebuild myself stronger than before. I looked out over the sprawling city, feeling the warm sunshine on my face. The pain was gone, the past was settled, and justice had run its course. For the first time in a very long time, I was completely free.